Welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking about something that's right up my alley, payments and payment companies. And that's because Walmart was in the news last week saying they'll be offering a instant pay by bank option through Fiserv. And of course, the initial question that some investors are asking is, what does that actually mean for companies like Visa and MasterCard? Well, the good news is you've come to the right place because I spent the good part of my corporate career working in this space. I know these companies, I know these products, and I have a pretty strong opinion about what this means, if anything. So let's get started. But let's go ahead and start off with what is Walmart actually doing? Now, if we look at this article, we see that Walmart's going to offer their customers the option to pay for their purchases through instant payments from their bank accounts in 2025, sidestepping credit and debit card networks. And the transactions are going to go through Fiserv's Now network, which integrates the clearinghouse's real-time payments network, or RTP, and the Federal Reserve's FedNow real-time payment system. Now, there's a lot of jargon in there, which we're going to clear up a little bit, but let's read a little bit further. Walmart already offers a pay-by-bank feature through Walmart Pay since earlier this year, but it's processed like digital checks through the Automated Clearinghouse Network, which is ACH, if you know what that is. But the payments could take about 3 days to be reflected in a customer's bank account. And I specifically wanted to call out this quote right here because we're going to talk about it in a minute. When the transaction processes as a real-time payment, customers get immediate access to see that payment come through. I see it hit my account and I can properly budget. Jamie Henry, Vice President of Emerging Payments at Walmart, told Bloomberg. It's not as if I got this phantom payment out there that's going to take place a couple days down the road. And we're going to break down why that's relevant or not, but let's talk a little bit about why people think it's a concern. Now, right off the bat, people say, okay, Walmart's a big retailer, and if they cut out part of their credit card spend by sidestepping the card networks, then what does that mean for companies like Visa and MasterCard? Now, Walmart's not a small merchant. They have, hundreds of millions of dollars of payments that a lot of those are going through cards today. Obviously, we know that. And the worry is that if they're able to meaningfully switch part of that volume off of the card networks, then it could really spell trouble for Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and Discover, since those are the 4 credit card networks in the US. Plus, obviously, the debit card networks as well, and of course, the issuing banks who are actually getting most of the interchange revenue anyway, not the card networks. And this is actually something that I don't think a lot of people know. People always say, oh, Visa and MasterCard are taking 3% off of every transaction, but that's not really how the economics work. And this picture explains it well, even though they're talking about debit. But you buy something for $100, there's a merchant discount fee, which is basically the interchange fee, and the merchant gets $98.57. Now, Visa and MasterCard is taking a network processing fee. In this example, it's 10 cents. And then the interchange fee actually goes to the issuing bank. That's the bank that actually issued your credit card. And then a portion of the transaction goes to the acquiring bank. That's basically the bank that's processing the payment. So as you can see, out of the $1.43 that the merchant had to pay in fees, actually the issuing bank gets the bulk of that, with the card networks only getting a small fraction of it. That's why when people say, oh, MasterCard and Visa are taking 3% off every transaction, it's just simply not true. Your issuing bank is getting the bulk of that interchange fee, and that's how they're able to give you rewards, because they're taking a fraction of those fees that they're getting and giving them back to you. All right, so now that we know a little bit more about interchange, let me tell you a little bit about my background and why I know a lot about this space. Now, first of all, if you watch my channel, you know that I'm invested in Visa and American Express. So as a shareholder, obviously, I'm very vested or have a vested interest into this type of news. But in my corporate career, I spent about 15 years working in payments and payments technology. That's basically what I did my whole career. I started as a programmer, actually writing code for these payment systems. And then I moved over to the business side where I was doing like infrastructure support as it relates to payment systems. And then eventually on the product side with all the features and working with these companies like the Clearinghouse and Fiserv. So it just so happens to be a space that I know a lot about because I lived and breathed it for over a decade. And I worked with folks in these companies about these real-time payment products during that time. I was actually part of the Fed's Faster Payments Task Force like a decade ago when the requirements for these systems were being discussed. So that's to say that these aren't really new ideas. And the capability to do this has been around for a while. It's just not all that widely adopted by banks or obviously merchants. And that's why I think this new story about Walmart adopting real-time payments, even though some people think it's going to be big news, I'll bet you anything, a year from now, we're going to look back and be like, oh yeah, what happened with that? But let me explain to you why. And now to be clear, Walmart is a beast, and only a retailer like them or Amazon could possibly make any meaningful traction when it comes to something like this. But I don't actually think they will. And here's a simple chart that'll help tell you why I think that. Now, this comes from the Fed's payment study, which they do every single year. This is something that we would look at in my job every single year because it had to do with payment trends. And if you look on the 2024 study on page 7, it says figure 4, stated payment preference for in-person payments. Now, if you look at other charts in here, they talk about the whole spectrum of payments. So there's ones where it's like all payment types all together, but that includes a lot of like bill payments that you would make that really have nothing to do with Walmart in particular. But then this one is stated payment preference for in-person payments, which is just way too many P's in one sentence, but this is what actually applies to Walmart and buying things in store. So if we just take a look, what we see is that between cash, credit, and debit is still the largest out of the 3 payment mechanisms in terms of in-person payments. Now, one thing that you may notice is that credit has been rising, which is no doubt a concern for merchants because credit is the one that they're earning the least on, and we'll get to why here in a minute. But if that one is growing, then that's also a push as to why they want to reduce those credit card fees. But if we come back, we see that debit's close to 40%, credit's a little bit over 35%, it looks like, and then cash miraculously is still at 20%. But the issue for Walmart is that this chart shows me that no one's going to really want this feature. Okay, that's not totally true because the people who actually do want this feature are 1, merchants like Walmart, and then 2, people who believe that the card networks and or banks are evil oligarchs that need to be disrupted and punished in favor of that scrappy underdog, well, Walmart in this case, but you get what I'm saying. But if we actually think about the list of people who don't want this, it's basically everyone in this chart that's making payments today, and let me show you why. Now let's start with cash. Now, someone who's using cash at Walmart either uses cash for everything or maybe doesn't trust or understand card or electronic payments. Regardless of the reason, if they aren't willing or able to use a debit card, then they're surely not going to use an instant pay from bank payment. It's just extremely unlikely that someone who's using cash for most things is going to switch to a connect directly to my bank account type of payment. Just my opinion. And then next is credit card. Now, people using credit would have to willingly give up their rewards, which most people believe is the biggest issue. And it's a big issue, but I personally wouldn't say it's the biggest. To me, the biggest issue is if you're using credit or even debit, which we'll talk about, then you have to give up your ability to dispute a transaction. Because real-time payments or quote pay-by-bank payments are designed to be credit-only payments, meaning you approve to push the payment and then it can't be reversed after that. The system was designed that way to reduce complexity and the cost of having to deal with disputes, which is great for banks and merchants, but not so great for consumers. And then lastly, let's talk about debit, which has been historically the highest and most used platform, at least over the past 8 years or so. Consumers have built-in protections and dispute processes that come along with those networks, plus they already know how it works. And they already get real-time account updates whenever they use their card. Because remember that comment from the Walmart executive where he was like, when the transaction processes as a real-time payment, customers get immediate access to see that payment come through. I see it hit my account and I can properly budget. It's not as if I have this phantom payment out there that's going to take place a couple days down the road, which is great, except that your debit card already works that way. Now, unless you're using Walmart's Pay by Bank feature today, which is ACH payments, but I don't think anyone's really using that. That's why we never hear about it. I mean, I tried to find just one article that talked about people using the feature, and I couldn't find one. So why is no one using it? Well, because everyone knows how to use a card or prefers cash, and this is a very important point. There is no incentive for anyone to use it. And we're going to come back to this idea of incentives because it's a very important part of why I don't think this is going to really mean anything. And just for a minute, let's think about what the process would be like if you actually wanted to use this feature. So number one, you got to get your bank information set up in the Walmart app somehow. And then when it's time to check out at the register, you have to scan the Walmart Pay QR code. Then you'll likely receive a payment notification from your own bank that you'll need to approve. And then you wait for it to get all the way back to Walmart. Now, believe it or not, that's a very similar process to what happens today every time you pay with card. But the difference is that you're not involved in any of it. All you do is swipe or tap and it all magically happens and works pretty much all the time. And this comes back to what I think the main problem is with this idea. There's absolutely no benefit to you, the consumer, in doing it. If anything, you're losing something by paying this way. You don't get your rewards, and you don't get the same dispute capabilities that you have with your debit and credit cards today. Plus, there's no incentive for your bank to actually promote this or implement it either, and here's why. If you swipe your card at Walmart, your bank's actually making money on the interchange fee. And remember the image we walked through before? Not only is your bank making money on that swipe, they're making the most money out of the whole chain. which means if your bank decides to do this real-time payment pay by bank feature, then instead of every payment you make being a profit driver for them, every payment you make in the new system is going to be a cost, since they have to pay the real-time networks for sending a transaction. So how many of our banks do you think are going to implement and promote a system that tells their customers basically to do this thing that's going to make them lose a bunch of money? I don't think very many. And so in the end, the only party that actually benefits from any of this is the merchant, in this case, Walmart. They haven't mentioned anything about getting a non-card payment discount here, and they don't offer that today that I know of. But if history's any guide, then the answer is going to be no, because Walmart and Target are again urging lawmakers to pass legislation to help reduce card interchange fees, which is what the U.S. government did in 2011 for debit interchange with the Durbin Amendment. I've talked about this in previous videos, because the Durbin Amendment capped debit card interchange, which drastically reduced the profitability for debit cards for banks. So what was the effect of that change? Well, your checking account rewards went away, the merchants paid less in interchange fees, and did you see lower prices at the stores? Well, no, you didn't, because the lower prices didn't actually get passed on to the consumer. So why would we think that they'll get passed on to the consumer this time? And that's part of the argument that the payment companies are making to lawmakers. The last time we saw a letter like this, retailers were lobbying for the Durbin Amendment windfall they did not pass on to consumers, despite testifying that they would. Now, there's a chance Walmart may create their own rewards program to try to incentivize people into using this payment method, but then I imagine that would kind of defeat the purpose of trying to save on interchange in the first place. Okay, so let's recap a little bit what we've talked about with this new pay-by-bank option with Walmart. So basically, they want to not have to pay the interchange fee, but they don't want to give you a discount, have you give up your dispute protections, give up any rewards that you're making, and make your checkout process less convenient and easy for you. So who's actually going to do this? Probably no one. That's why I say this press release is probably much ado about nothing, even though Walmart is one of the only merchants that could make a meaningful change in this space other than Amazon, I think. I just think the reality of this situation is that there are no incentives for anyone except the merchant who just wants more money, right? So consumers don't benefit, they're not going to do it. Banks don't benefit, they're not going to promote it. And I just don't think that's a situation that's likely to work. And again, these aren't actually new ideas. I mean, people have been talking about this in the payments industry for as long as I can remember. And we always see these press releases of new capabilities and nothing happens because there's no driving incentive to make anyone change their behavior. And I know I'm probably biased because I worked in payments, but I feel like merchants complaining about payment fees is just something that doesn't make a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, a merchant's number one goal is to actually get paid. And I'm sure they love having a system that's available, that everyone knows how to use, allows them to get paid anywhere in the world in just about any currency, and it just works pretty much every time. Now, sometimes we need to realize that maybe that's actually a net benefit to performing commerce, but that's just my personal view. So if you saw this news story and you hold Visa or MasterCard or Amex and you got a little worried, in my opinion, you don't really have much to worry about. I think what's going to happen is we're going to look back on this announcement in maybe a year or so and realize that it did absolutely nothing to move the dial of reducing card transactions. And we'll all be like, oh yeah, what happened with that? As we pay with our card at the checkout terminal. But that's just my point of view on it. I'm curious to hear what you all think, so let me know down in the comments below. Now, if you want to hear more about how MasterCard and Visa are different than American Express and just the card networks in general, go ahead and check out this video right here. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Financial independence is true freedom, so keep building and stacking wins, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.